I grew up in Houston, Texas. For the sake of safety, I'm not gonna say exactly where I grew up because I know there's people on the internet who are crazy, who are mad, and I know I look good. If you look on Google, you will find that Houston, Texas is one of the most diverse cities in the country. LA, Houston. Houston is number 7, with it being 26% black. Although that 26 is probably, it's a lot because Houston has so many people. And if you're an immigrant making a decent amount of money, you're concentrated in a space with other immigrants who are making a decent amount of money. In my case, that was a bunch of brown people. I don't know if that's politically correct, but that's what they called themselves. The thing is, y'all, when you are immigrant and are of a certain class in America, you tend to adhere to white culture, white politics, white respectability politics. If it's not white respectability politics, it's white culture. It's their kids. Because who are they going to school with if you're upper middle class and upper class in America in 2000, in the 2010s and early 2000s, and even if it's in 2020 something, I don't know, I'm not in public school anymore. Who are they around when you're sending your kids off to education based off of the area you live in? You're around the white people, you're around white culture. Anything advanced in America, 9 times out of 10 is lumped in with white culture. My parents didn't want me to go to the middle school that I was zoned to. The school that I was zoned to, I'm not sure what their education statistics were, but one of the big things that I noticed is there was a lot of minorities there. But I think white people are actually the minority at that school, but that's the school we were zoned to. I grew up in a good neighborhood. I never lived in the hood. We were never low income. Because my parents wanted to send me to a place that consisted of a better education and also consisted of white culture, we moved houses to be closer to the better school. It is so dangerous to send your kids to the better school. And if the better school is another term for the whiter school, don't do it. Don't do it. See, my parents were Nigerian immigrants, okay? In Nigeria, basically everybody's black. It has like a 99.9% population of black people. Race is not a factor in Nigeria at all. Tribalism, when my parents were growing up there, it may have been a thing, but I don't believe that they were affected by tribalism. I won't speak on that. Just know that they weren't really affected by tribalism. So this type of, you get my point, racism wasn't a thing. They didn't know any better sending me to a school where white culture was dominant. Mind you, in elementary school, I went to a very diverse elementary school. The neighborhood that I grew up in growing up, I had a neighbor on this side who was white. I had a neighbor on this side who was black. I had a neighbor across the street who was Mexican. I had a neighbor next to them who was Middle Eastern. Neighbors 2 doors down who were black. After that, black. After that, white. My elementary school, across from me, black student. On the other side of me, Asian, black, white. Like, I grew up such a diverse way. So many different cultures. I'm not saying I'm the most well-versed, but I knew that there was people who didn't like me, who didn't look like me, and I knew that there was people that did. By the time I got to middle school, my world changed. I've struggled with depression for a long time. I'm not claiming that's over my life. I'm not claiming depression over my life. Like, that's I no longer want to associate with that, even though, I'm not saying that I'll never struggle with, I don't know. But I struggled with depression for a long time, and I was talking to my mom about it. I was talking to my parents about it, and they were trying to figure out when that whole thing started, because I was so different as a kid. And we kind of collectively traced it back to middle school. My mom told me the other day, I think when you started being friends with that white girl, that's when you started to change. And that brings me to my point. Middle school, I basically was thrusted into white culture in a way that I was never thrusted into white culture before. All of a sudden, it was who are these all these white people? Kurt Cobain, Taylor Swift. I can't even remember all these white people all these country singers that they used to listen to. Suddenly everything I said became funny. I was the funny girl. Mind you, I've never been that funny in my life. I think maybe people laugh at the way I act, But when it comes to telling jokes, everything that I said was funny. I remember one time I said, I think I said somebody was fine, like maybe a celebrity. That was the funniest thing to them white kids. Me calling somebody fine, something so basic. If you see what I'm getting at, thrusting a black child into a white environment leaves them open to so much insecurity, so much lack of self-worth, and I'll explain that further. So much, I guess you could say, identity loss, even though being black isn't my entire identity, but at that time it felt like it was, because that was the thing that made me different. Comparison, and I know all of those people, I know everyone watching this who grew up and had to go to a school that was filled with white culture. They assimilated to white culture, and throwing a young girl who grew up in a very diverse environment, who goes to church on Sunday and sees mostly black people, mostly Nigerian people, who was at a certain point when she was younger really associated herself with black culture. I low-key am saying a lot about myself, but you know, my cousins, they're Nigerian. I have a lot of cousins that are Nigerian and African American, because one side is Nigerian, one side is just black American. So growing up with them, like, both of my parents are Nigerian, but growing up with my cousins, you know, I experienced black culture. I saw, you know, like, it was just black. It was just black. I identified with being black. Being like 11 years old, dark skin, 4C hair, short, hair was permed, had to get perms. At that time I was wearing weave. I don't know about y'all, but I started wearing weave when I was like 8. Big. I hit puberty when I was in 4th grade, y'all. I started puberty when I was in 4th grade. TMI, but I got my period when I was like 10. I was 5'6", probably weighed more than everybody else. I don't know how much I weighed at that time. I'll talk about being fat later on in life, but at that time I was considered fat. I'm sticking out like a sore thumb. Like, on top of that, I don't know anything about Keith Urban. I think that's what they're saying. I don't know anything about Keith Urban. I don't listen to Taylor Swift. I don't know these white things. So here I am in my adolescence trying to find community, because at that age that's what young people do. They try and individualize themselves from their parents, trying to make friends, trying to find my circle, people like me. I have two options: assimilate to white culture or stick out like a sore thumb. I spoke different. I was looking on Facebook like a really long time ago, and I came across this video of me in middle school. If I can, I'll add it here. I probably deleted it. The way I spoke, I spoke like a little white girl. And yes, there is a way to speak. There is a way white people sound versus how black people sound. Argue with your mom. It's not about speaking proper. Goodbye. The tone and inflections, please argue with somebody else. Accept that you may speak like a white girl. That is what it is. Anyways, I sounded like a little white girl. My attitude, the way I dressed, everything started to assimilate to white. I remember specifically, maybe it was like 6th grade, 7th grade. There was this white girl who said nigga a lot that I was friends with. I think she used to low-key call me an Oreo. And at that time, of course, I thought it was funny, but looking back, that's not funny. And around that time, to bring around my point, is when I started to become depressed. I started to become depressed because my surroundings was telling me that I was other, and the type of other that I was not good enough. The people around me were getting different attention than I was. I don't fit into being white, and for a long time I felt like I had to change myself. When I was around white people, I didn't know how to act because white people kind of created a character out of me. Being black, everything that I said was funny, even if I wasn't trying to be funny. And there's no way to blend in. I'm not mixed. I'm not light skinned. I am a dark skin. Especially back then, we were outside a lot. I was darker skinned black girl with 4C hair. People would comment on my hair like my hair was it was a spectacle almost. And when you're growing up, you don't have the words to express how that makes you feel, being the only one who isn't a part of this Caucasian tribe, or being the only one who doesn't relate to their culture. White pop culture is not the same as black pop culture. I promise you. Like, I don't know what happens in white culture. Do you get what I mean? Like, there's very few things that, like, I feel like Zendaya, that's white culture. Taylor Swift, that's part of white culture. Other than that, I don't know who is who in white culture. I don't. That's the same thing from when I was a kid. Do you get how it's harder to relate when you're black? Anywho, it affected me developmentally. I'm fine. I feel like I just made it sound like I'm slow or something. I know a bunch of people who still are really interested into white culture, who have taken on white characteristics that don't belong to them, as in wanting to have their hair a certain way because it's too different to have your 4C hair out or your curly hair out, dressing a certain way, being a part of Alpha Psi Sigma, whatever. Y'all, that is the sunken place. Not saying that there's anything not saying that there's anything wrong with, you know, white culture in and of itself, but that loss of identity is tragic. It's weird. One of my biggest goals in life is to be able to bridge that gap between excellent education and not having to conform to white society. PSA for black girls who grew up around white people: find your way back home. All the harmful beliefs and negative and self-deprecating things that you might feel about yourself for the simple fact that you're trying to assimilate to look like a white girl with blonde hair. I know someone's gonna comment, but you are wearing a blonde. That's a part of black culture, baby. Wigs. Frying your hair on 450 degrees so you can straighten it. I love being able to have a diverse group of people around me, but being black and not being able to relate to black people or black culture, you've never seen Friday, you've never seen, you know, Love and Basketball, you've never seen Love Jones, you don't know any of the black spots in your neighborhood, you don't know where the black people are at, you don't know black lingo, you say things like yacht. Only white people be saying that, or maybe that's what the young people say. You have a certain lingo that white people who are disconnected from African American culture, they have, and they only have that weird chopped up version of AAVE because they've never experienced it firsthand. So now you as a black person, you don't know what you're using the white lingo to say black stuff, but you should know how to say it, because you know what I'm saying, it's because you're black. There's a disconnect. If you're in that position, you may start to not even care about black issues, black culture. You may start to adapt or adopt a different set of values that negates black culture because you're around so many white people who do not experience things firsthand. I went to a different high school in 9th grade. And I had to move high schools in 10th grade. 10th grade, I was back to being around people who I was around in elementary school. Not the same people, but the same demographic of people. It's so funny because in middle school, I was around a lot of brown people that were like white culture, that were thrusted into white culture. In high school, it was a lot of brown people who said nigga. There was a smaller percentage of white people, but thankfully, I think by the time I was in 8th grade, I realized that, yeah, I don't know, being white, like I was too woke, even as an 8th grader. I was always hyper aware that I was black. Experiencing microaggressions, people reminded me that I stuck out. But by the time I got to high school, I was back to being, you know, a black girl who was around black culture. Nigerian culture, which was a blessing, y'all. And in college, I've been around Nigerians most of my life, but you know, that whole white culture thing was suctioned out of me, and I'm so grateful. So if you are thinking about sending your kids to a white school for better education, I hope and pray that you find a way to keep them around black people. If you're an immigrant parent watching this, please listen. Or you find a school where there is a mixture of people and cultures, or there's a school where there's black people, who also get good education. And if you are a victim of being thrusted into Keith Urban and whatever all these other white artists are in the early 2010s, baby, I am with you. If you need to know what movies to watch, I'm playing. But yeah, guys, I see you. It affected my self-esteem too, but you could always come back. And if you have the ability, move to a black city, move to Atlanta, move to Houston, move to DC, move to a place where there's a lot of black people, so you can find your way back. I hope this reaches the right audience. Thank y'all for the abundance of subscribers I got last week. I hope y'all have a good day. All right, I'll talk to y'all later.